Who am I? Well, perhaps from a spiritual perspective, another question might be, who am I not?
Finding out who we are not, we can, by rational analysis, we can understand, but we are not this body or mind.
In a few words, this is among the principal teachings of one of the most respected Indian saints, that we are not this body.
We can say, yes, I understand I'm not this body, but my experience is I am this body. If someone comes at me with a knife, I'll be frightened because this body, my actual experience is this body is myself. In order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to turn our attention within.
And this is where Michael James comes in. He is one of the world's leading scholars on the seminal works of Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, whose teachings have influenced millions.
Bhagavan says this whole world is nothing but a dream. If this is all a dream, what does that imply?
Well, everything, that you don't exist.
And it's here where our story begins. Ramana Maharshi, whose gift was teaching self-inquiry, spent his whole life in Tiruvannamalai, India, walking the holy mountain of Arunachala. And long after his death in 1950, Michael James from London visited Ramana's ashram here, intending to stay for just a few days. But his visit lasted 20 years.
My idea when I came to Tiruvannamalai is I may stay for just a few days, learn a little bit about what Ramana Maharshi was about, and then I'll continue my travels. But when I came there, the first book I read was Who Am I? And as soon as I read that, I was hooked.
As were many others over the years. Paramahansa Yogananda even visited with Ramana Maharshi. Sri Satya Sai Baba of Puttaparthi, India, was an advocate of Ramana and recommended to his followers the self-inquiry practice of Who Am I?
Over the years in Tiruvannamalai, I met many people who said they had been sent there by Sai Baba.
Yes, absolutely.
He didn't send all people there, but people who had a certain inclination and interest in these deeper things, he often advised them to come and spend time in Tiruvannamalai. We are each on our own spiritual journey, but we're at different stages along the journey. The practice is all important.
Michael James insists it's all so very simple. Just continue to ask many questions.
The most important thing to question is our own identity. Mm-hmm. If we're following the spiritual path, the ultimate question is, who am I?
So you understand why people might offer some resistance at times.
Why talk about people offering resistance? We are offering resistance because turning within is putting our head on the chopping block. We are not yet ready to die.
He's talking about the death of the ego upon answering the question, who am I? Welcome to Souljourns. This interview was recorded in London, England, and Coronado, California on October 13th, 2020.
Michael James, welcome to Souljourns. It's such a pleasure to be able to speak with you in person, one-on-one, via Zoom, of course. For our many Souljourns followers, and I'll describe who they are in just a minute, but a warm welcome.
Thank you.
It helps to know something about the man who has devoted more than 44 years of your life to the teachings of Ramana Maharshi and self-inquiry. And I know you prefer, I've heard this in the grapevine, to only speak about Ramana and his teachings. Yes. However, earlier you graciously consented to allowing me to ask a few questions about your personal life and how you got involved in all this. So in that light, would you please tell us about your childhood and about your initial interests in finding out that there's more to life than meets the eye, so to speak?
Both my parents were born as Anglicans, but were converted to Catholicism. Mm-hmm. So I was brought up as a Catholic, and I was sent to Catholic boarding schools. So I had a fairly religious upbringing. And when I was young, I remember questioning things. I remember one idea when I was very small that frightened me a lot when I thought about, because I was told that if you go to heaven, you remain there forever and ever. And this idea of everlasting time was somehow a very frightening idea to me.
Frightening?
Not exactly frightening, but it seemed a very daunting idea. But I think, of course, now in retrospect, I see what we are actually seeking is is what is eternal, and what is eternal is not everlasting time. Time is just an appearance.
Right.
We experience time in waking and dream, but not in sleep. So time is not real. So eternity is not everlasting time. It is timelessness.
Well, that's well put. And in reference to your comment about your feeling about eternity in heaven being daunting, what about the opposite? How much more daunting might it be to be eternity in hell? I would think that would either.
Somehow I never entertained that possibility. I sort of took for granted, but I was going to behave myself sufficiently to, I mean, I didn't, yeah. Anyway, I was more concerned about the eternal, the everlasting heaven and everlasting hell, but everlasting hell, I suppose, would be even more daunting.
You were much smarter than I was, being raised Catholic. And I later became a follower of the Church of England, the Anglican faith. Here in America, it's called the Episcopal Church, very, very closely aligned, all of those. When was it then in your childhood, I presume, maybe in your teen years or adult years, that you started to drift away from organized religion called Anglicanism at first, and then Catholicism, and venture off into the world of the mystics?
That is another thing that I remember thinking as a very small child, was the idea was whether anything exists when we don't see it. So I remember as a small child being in my bedroom, wondering if there's any world outside my bedroom. When I don't see it, whether anything exists.
When you close your eyes, yes.
Yes. So I think from these sort of this type of thinking at a very small age, I assume that in previous lives, I was in some way inclined in this sort of way, this sort of philosophical and spiritual type of thinking. But as I say, I was ready to accept most of what I was told about religion. I more or less accepted it without a lot of question until I was in my early teens. By that time, I was at the senior boarding school, which in England we call public schools, even though they're private schools. Right. And that was a school run by Benedictine monks. And because I was always interested in spiritual matters, I was always asking questions. And I remember one time asking one of the monks, because by that time I was thinking, why should we believe? There's no, I mean, it seemed to me unreasonable to believe something without a good reason to believe it. So that's why I was often questioning things. And once I sort of thought, I didn't know anything about Christian mystics, but I knew there were some people who were called mystics. And I assumed these were people who had some sort of experience of, it wasn't just, for mystics, it's not just a matter of belief, it's something about experience.
Right.
So I remember asking one of the monks how I could learn more about the mystics. And he said, oh, that wouldn't be, he sort of brushed me aside and said, no, that wouldn't be suitable for you. I said, why? He said, because you're not religious. I said, what do you mean I'm not religious? He said, you ask too many questions.
You challenge authority, in other words.
So, yeah. So this, to me, in retrospect, I now think this is one of the main differences between religion and spirituality. Religion, of course, there's overlap, and religion can lead to spirituality, but spirituality is about questioning everything, whereas religion is about believing a certain set of ideas. And the other main difference is that the most important thing to question is our own identity. Mm-hmm. If we're following the spiritual path, the ultimate question is, who am I?
Yeah.
Whereas religion is all about identity. I am a Catholic, I am a Protestant, I am a Muslim, I am Sufi, I am Sunni, I'm Shia, I'm Hindu, I'm Buddhist, I'm Shaivite, I'm Vaishnavite, I'm Sikh, I'm this and that. That it's all about, religion provides people with an identity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what attracts many people to religion, is people want an identity.
Yeah.
Whereas in the spiritual path, the fundamental question is, who am I?
That comment needs to be underscored, I think, because there's a place, very, very large place in my life for religion. It's what brought me to the dance, as a phrase in America might be said. And I'm forever grateful that it gave me the push that I felt I needed. We have similarities in our lives. I mean, I went around as a kid, actually for decades, asking, who am I? Why am I here? And what's it all about? Without ever thinking about Ramana Maharshi. And of course, I never knew the answers to those questions for decades. But in my Catholic high school, in my hometown, I was introduced to the concept that never had a word back in the 60s called meditation. The group was called Sodality, where people revered Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus, in a form of Sodality, which was a meditation every day. So that, I'm not sure they did a smart thing, because they, in a way, they started to help me to question, just like you did, the teachings of your faith. So here we were, both in high school, public school for you, which is private school here. And all of a sudden, the light bulb starts to get brighter and brighter, burning in your head about who you are. When was it that you first heard the name Ramana Maharshi and his teachings?
Because I was always looking for some deeper meaning to life. During my first year at university, when I was studying psychology, I found the psychology I was being taught very superficial. So I wanted to find something more, and also, having lived a very cloistered life, 10 years in boarding school, I was eager to have more experience of the world. So I decided to take time off from university and travel to India. I knew very little about India, except that it was the birthplace of Buddhism and of other religions. During those travels, I first heard Bhagavan's name, I think, when I was in Sri Lanka. There were a couple, if I remember correctly, he was from the States somewhere, and she was from Newcastle in England. And they asked me if I'd heard about Ramana Maharshi. I said no. And they showed me Arthur Osborne's book. And all I read was Bhagavan's death experience. That kindled my curiosity. So I decided, when I go back to India, I'll visit Tiruvannamalai, Ramana Ashram. But somehow I must have changed my mind, because when I came back, I decided, because by that time it was, I think it was March by that time, I decided to go and spend another summer in North India, in the Himalayas, and then to come south again after that. So I spent that summer in the Himalayas, and while I was in the Himalayas that summer, I met one Spanish man who was reading Paul Brunton's books. So he told me a bit about Paul Brunton's book. And one of the books he had was Message from Arunachala. I didn't actually read it, but he told me about it. And I then connected that, this is the Ramana Maharshi that I was told about in Sri Lanka. Yes, I want to go there. At the end of that summer, I came south again, and I came to Tiruvannamalai. My idea when I came to Tiruvannamalai is I may stay for just a few days, learn a little bit about what Ramana Maharshi was about, and then I'll continue my travels. But when I came there, the first book I read was Who Am I? Maybe not a very good translation, but I read it. And as soon as I read that, I was hooked. This is what I've been looking for. It seems so obvious to me, but more important than any other question is the question, who am I? Because if we don't even know what we ourselves actually are, what value can any other knowledge that we have?
Absolutely.
That is, knowing other things without knowing the knower is obviously You obviously can't be sure of anything you know if you don't even know for sure what you yourself are.
It's great to have such a powerful magnet you pull you to something important is like that so early in life. In your late teens and early 20s, did you see anybody else in your age group who were hooked by this as well?
In those days, that was in the mid 70s. There were a lot of it was the hippie route to travel overland to India. So there were lots of so-called hippies, but they were people with a lot of them were like me, seeking something. But what each person is seeking, I mean, it varies from individual to individual. But once I came to Tiruvannamalai and settled there, there were a few other contemporaries of mine, foreigners of the same age as me. I think the same year I came there, David Godman also came there, and Chris Quilke. So there were just a few others, and there were some older. But in those days, there were less than a dozen foreigners living in Tiruvannamalai. So now there are probably many more.
So your heart was ignited, and did it stay burning at full tilt from that point forward, or did you go in and out of how you felt about this pursuit?
No. Once I was hooked, I was hooked.
I'm delighted to have some insight as to the young Michael, because I know your interviews are always deep in the heart of Ramana's teachings, and you have allowed us this little deviation for which I'm grateful. This is an unorthodox interview because it's appealing, I'm just going to guess here, to many people who are not that familiar. And you're giving us a good overview. And I've got about only 24 questions to go. We'll see how far we go on these. I think I've already mentioned to you privately that Jody and I have been longtime 25-year followers of Sai Baba in India. And I just want to make this one point. It'll take me about 30 seconds. The audience for this particular interview will be made up of a variety of people. People very serious about their spiritual path, who know nothing about other teachers, presumably. And of course, the followers of Sri Satya Sai Baba from India. This website, Souljourns, was started going on 23 years ago. Are you aware that Sai Baba often advocated studying and practicing Ramana's teachings? I mean, that was his number one message about non-duality, about you're not who you think you are. There is only the one, and you can realize that. That's what you're teaching.
Over the years in Tiruvannamalai, I met many people who said they had been sent there by Sai Baba.
Yes, absolutely.
He didn't send all people there, but people who had a certain inclination and interest in these deeper things, he often advised them to come and spend time in Tiruvannamalai.
Yeah. All of this is so fascinating. I want to jump from here to there. I got to rein myself in a little bit. Ramana's core teachings, the way I see them, were about non-duality, something still quite foreign, I regret to think, I hope I've become wrong in this assumption, among Westerners in your country, in the UK, in America, and throughout the rest of the West. Do you have a reason for that? Is it just because, I mean, people are less and less religious, it seems. They don't follow any particular type of spiritual or religious path in many events. But why? Why is there not a greater curiosity in the West towards what Ramana has to teach?
I don't think it's a matter of East or West, really. Even in India, where people often have a very superficial understanding of Advaita. And by no means all people in India are Advaitins. There are many that Advaita is a minority. It is a very prominent school of Indian philosophy, but it's a minority. There are so many other systems of philosophy, and even among the Vedantins mean those who are. Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. That is the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and Bhagavad Gita. Advaita is just one interpretation of it. There are other interpretations also. So many Vedantins are strongly opposed to Advaita. They are staunch Dvaitins. They believe in the duality, the difference between soul and God. Advaita is a difficult pill. If we think about it deeply, it's difficult for most. It's not surprising that it's difficult for most people to accept, because our whole experience in waking and dream is an experience of plurality, multiplicity. So to say, but there is only one, it seems to go against all our experience.
I was raised Catholic. I know that firsthand. It's heresy. It's blasphemy to suggest that.
And Advaita doesn't even just say, but there is only one. It says there's one only without a second.
Yes.
Ekam Advaitiam. So there is no other. There is only that one thing. But that doesn't make sense with all this multiplicity. How, I mean, Advaita is contradicted by all our experience of multiplicity, or so it would seem. That's what all the other schools of Indian philosophy, their argument against Advaita, they say Advaita is disproved by just seeing all this multiplicity. But so the first challenge for Advaita is to explain the multiplicity. It explains all this multiplicity. This is just a false appearance, an illusory appearance.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Advaita generally explains the appearance of multiplicity.
But you say it's just an illusory appearance. Those are fighting words for many people throughout the world. What do you mean to suggest, Michael, that none of this is real?
Well, yes, but and even within Advaita, there are different levels of explanation. That is, many Advaitins will not be willing to accept Bhagavan's teachings because it's too radical. Because Bhagavan's teachings are the deepest and most radical explanation offered by Advaita.
That I did not know. That he's seen as being so radical.
Yes, because that is, for example, one thing that Bhagavan often emphasized is that what we now take to be waking is actually just a dream. Is here and there in many ancient Advaitic texts, but it's generally interpreted to be, but those texts are referring to dream as an analogy. Waking is like dream in certain respects, but it is not.
I see. Their view, their belief is different substantially.
Substantially. But there's a good reason for this, because Advaita is such a radical philosophy, very few would be willing to accept it normally. So in order to help people slowly come to that acceptance of the truth of Advaita, more superficial and diluted explanations are given to suit people of different levels of spiritual maturity. So, as I say, there are many people who call themselves traditional Advaitins, who will not accept, but this world is just a mental projection, but this is all just a dream. There's a very elaborate explanations are given, but they distinguish between Maya and Avidya. Maya means Maya has created all this. Avidya is the individual's ignorance. So they accept that there are many people all seeing the same world, but this world has been created by God out of his Maya Shakti, his power of Maya, but it's through our ignorance that we see it. So, I mean, it's a very, very complex explanations they give, whereas Bhagavan gives very, very simple explanations, simple and clear explanations, but extremely radical. Bhagavan says this whole world is nothing but a dream. If this is all a dream, what does that imply?
Well, everything, that you don't exist.
Yeah, because in a dream, how many dreamers are there? How many people are seeing the dream? Only one. Well, it's not even the person seeing the dreamer projects the dream world, sees itself as one of the people in its dream, and sees many other people. So because the dreamer is nothing but ego, because we as ego identify ourselves with as a person, and we see many other people, we, this ego, identify those other people as other egos, and we assume that all the other people are seeing the world just as we are. But when we wake up so long as we're dreaming, the whole dream world seems to be real. And all the other people we see in the dream seem to be seeing the world just as we are.
Sure.
We have conversations with them, and they interact with us as if they are aware of this world just as we are. But when we wake up, as soon as we wake up, we recognize all that was a mental projection. All those other people were just a figment of our imagination.
We're going to get back to that.
If in our dream we were walking down the street and we suddenly found we were naked and we're feeling very embarrassed, and then woke up, the embarrassment would vanish immediately, because we would know all those other people who are looking at us and laughing were just our own imagination. So why is this? So long as we are dreaming, we assume that we are awake, and the dream world seems to be real.
Well, go ahead.
As soon as we wake up, we are able to recognize that it was a mental projection. And we don't need to be learned or educated to know this. Even a totally uneducated person is able to recognize that when they wake up from a dream, oh, that was just a dream, it wasn't real.
That's a question I have for you, about 10 questions down, particularly about that point, because increasingly, I'm sure you must be aware of this.
Yeah,
I'm trained as a journalist, and I go looking for people who don't call themselves self-realized or self-enlightened, but are thought of by others as being that. And we judge them by their absence of ego and by their sweeping understanding of the spiritual path that Ramana talks about, such as yourself, for example. And my question later on has to do with those walking the earth today as awakened individuals. There seems to be a disconnect there. Doesn't the world disappear for them? Why are they still in it?
But the point I was going to make now is,
yes,
the reason the dream world seems to be real, so long as we're experiencing it, what is actually real is only ourself, only I. Because we experience ourselves as if we are a body, the body that we experience as I seems to us to be real, because I is real. If this body is I, then this body is real. And this body is part of the world. So the whole world seems to be real. So long as we are dreaming, the dream body and dream world seem to be real. But as soon as we wake up, that's as soon as we leave that dream and come to this dream, our identification with the body of that dream is broken. We no longer experience that body as I. As soon as we don't experience that body as I, we're able to recognize it was unreal. Because that dream body wasn't, though it seemed to be I then, it wasn't actually I, because I am this body, not that body. So it seems to us. So now this world seems to be real, that world seems to be unreal. But so any world, so long as we experience it, seems to be real, because we never experience any world without experiencing ourselves as a person in that world, as a body in that world. Since that body is experienced by us as I, and therefore seems to us to be real, the whole world seems to be real, so long as that body identification is there. As soon as our identification with that body is broken by leaving that dream and coming to another dream, we're then able to recognize that that is just a dream. So in a dream, though it seems there are many people seeing the dream world, what is actually seeing the dream world is not any person. It's only the dreamer. The dreamer is ego. So as ego, how dreams come about, we project a dream body, which we take as I, and through the 5 senses of that dream body, we project a dream world. So according to Bhagavan, this waking state is no different. So according to Bhagavan, there is only one ego. The one who is aware of this world, that is the one ego. And this world is just its dream. So Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapatu, he says something which is so radical, even most Advaitins will not be willing to accept it. Well,
What's that?
They won't, everyone, even most Advaitins have great respect for Bhagavan. They know Bhagavan is something great, but they'll try and find some way of interpreting it so it doesn't mean what it means. That is what Bhagavan says is, in verse 26 of Uludunapatu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. In this context, everything means all phenomena, all appearances.
Including self with a small s, I mean the human self, the mind-body self.
Yeah. So then he said, ego itself is everything. So all of this is just an expansion of ego, and it's what it implies. Then he says, therefore, investigating what it is, that means what this ego is giving up everything. Why? Because when we investigate this ego seems, the nature of ego is we seem to be ego so long as we're looking at other things, looking away from ourselves towards other things. If we turn our attention back towards ourselves, away from all other things, if we see ourself alone, we will then recognize that what we actually are is just pure awareness. Ego will be will be dissolved, and the whole world, which existed only in the view of ego, will also disappear along with it. This is such a radical teaching. Very, very few people will be willing to accept it. That is why in Advaita, there are many other levels of explanation are given to suit people who are who are willing to accept a little, but not to accept the full deal.
I've used a term, you say radical, I use a term that Jody and I sometimes quibble over because I use it too much. But this started back in the days 30 years ago when I picked up a book called A Course in Miracles about Vedanta and Advaita. And the term I used was revolutionary. In other words, to actually understand and furthermore to accept and practice what Ramana teachings in no small measure makes you a spiritual revolutionary, certainly a religious revolutionary.
Yeah, definitely.
It is radical. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why there seems to be so relatively few people willing to engage in it to the extent that you are.
But that's, when we talk about people, we are talking as if all this multiplicity is real.
Right.
So, but that's fine. Because we have to talk at different levels, because in different contexts, different levels of explanation are appropriate. So,
well, we seem to have to talk within the cage in which we seemingly live.
Yeah. So it seems to us that there are many people in this world, and if we look at the people in this world, there are people who seem to be good people, people who seem to be bad people, and all the shades in between. So the explanation that we have to give is that we are each on our own spiritual journey, but we're at different stages along the journey. So only those who are very far advanced along this spiritual journey will be willing to accept these things. Mm-hmm. For others, there are other things which are appropriate to them. That is, all these religions, of course, there's both good and bad in religion, because religions ultimately are made by the human mind. So many bad things come out of religions, like people fight wars over religions, they persecute each other, they do all sorts of terrible things in the name of religion. But the religion, if taken in the right way, can be an introduction to the spiritual path. So
I agree.
Because people are on different stages of development, that different teachings are appropriate for different people. So in India, that within Hinduism is not really one religion. It's a whole family of religions. There are so many different philosophies, so many different beliefs, practices within Hinduism. And pretty much one can choose whatever one likes. So there are different philosophies and different practices to suit people of different levels of spiritual development. And as I say, the highest of all of these is Advaita, but even within Advaita, they have to cater for different levels of spiritual development, which is why different levels of explanation are given.
You might be surprised to learn that in far-flung places from India and from the UK, such as where I am in San Diego, California, first thing we found when we moved here 6 years ago is a Vedanta center. And there are people from the tradition of Advaita Vedanta who come and listen, talk, challenge, ask questions, and give wonderful talks. One of whom is Swami Sarvapriyananda, who I think has sort of a global following now because of his clarity.
YouTube videos are very popular, yes.
He used to come with some regularity because he was based in Hollywood and now he's in New York City. But what you're saying reminds me a lot of what he's been saying too. And permit me to ask you another question as we weave back and forth between this wonderful story. Tiruvannamalai, took me a long time to learn how to pronounce that. Tiruvannamalai is where you spent a significant portion of your life, Michael, the Indian town where Ramana lived, either in or beneath the mountain of Arunachala. Is it right that you lived there? Am I correct in knowing that you lived there for 20 years? And if so, you told me why you went there earlier in this conversation. What did you do there, and whatever caused you to leave if you made such an investment of yourself in that wonderful place?
Well, once I found Bhagavan's teachings, I had no desire to leave, and I was very happy there. I soon after, that is, after reading Who Am I started to read other books because I wanted to understand more. But the main thing I wanted to understand is how to put it into practice. And there's a lot of confusing things. That is, not everyone understood Bhagavan's teachings very deeply. So people have written their own ideas about what the practice of self-investigation is. Very soon after I came there, I came across the book Patha Sri Ramana by Sadhu Om. And actually I was taken to meet Sadhu Om before I had a chance to read the book. And when I met him, I found that actually I'd already met him one day while going around the hill.
So this is a long time ago because he's been gone from this earthly plane for a long time.
Yes, this is 1976.
Okay.
Very soon I came into, I very quickly understood that Sadhu Om is the one person who can explain Bhagavan's teachings very, very clearly. And after I've been going to visit him several times, I was asking him about some translations of Muruganu's verses, Guru Vachaka Kavai, in which Muruganu recorded Bhagavan's, many of Bhagavan's oral teachings in Tamil verses. This was being translated by Professor Swaminathan and serialized in the Mountain Path. So I was reading these, and wherever I didn't understand a particular idea, I came and asked Sadhu Om, because I knew Sadhu Om was the expert in Muruganu's works. He had edited Guru Vachaka Kavai, and he was, at that time, a book was being printed, which was his Tamil prose paraphrase, because the Tamil verses are very difficult to understand. So he had paraphrased it into simple Tamil prose to help people understand. That was being published at that time. So I would come and ask Sadhu Om questions about it. And one day he said to me, why don't we start making our own translation? Then I was going to him every day, and we were sitting, and he could communicate quite well in English because he had natural powers of communication, but he didn't actually know English very well. He just studied up to high school level English. So he would, in his own broken English, he would write the meaning, and then I would question him, what did this mean, what did this mean? And then I would do the polish it and make it better. So we were working together on this for, I can't remember how many years it was till we finished, because it's 1,254 verses or something. So
Wow.
it's a big work. So we were working on it for a long time. And then after that, we were translating other works of Bhagavan. And I mean, from more or less from the time I met him, which was in maybe September, October 1976, till he passed away in March 1985. So that's 8.5 years. I was spending every day with him, and we were translating, and I'm a relentless questioner. Just like I troubled all the monks at my school by asking too many questions,
Sure.
which they felt very uncomfortable about. Sadhguru was the perfect person for asking questions, because the more you question, the more you get. That is, he was a font of very deep and clear understanding of Bhagavan's teachings, but you get only to the extent that you ask for it. One thing I found with him often, because I would question things, I would be questioning relentlessly, and I'd be questioning more and more deeply. I would find sometimes when I was sitting there, people would come and ask him questions, and he'd give a certain explanation. And I would think that's different to the explanation he gave me. So I would then afterwards, I would ask him, why did you answer like this to that person, but to me you answered in a different way?
Mhm.
He said, answers are according to the questioner. If they were to question as deeply as you're questioning, they would get the same deep answers. Since their questions are more superficial, the more superficial answers are what is appropriate for them.
Wonderfully put. Let me see if I can put that into practice myself right now with you. Possibly a sensitive question. Feel free not to answer it. Do you have any idea where I'm going?
No, you're free to go anywhere.
I cannot think of anybody else, at least in my sphere of knowledge, who's been studying Ramana's wonderful teachings for 44 years plus, without himself or herself becoming awakened. And I know these terms float about the atmosphere. I never know which one is correct. Is it terribly impolite to ask you about yourself? I gave you a way out.
I make no pretense. I am just, I'm an ordinary spiritual aspirant. I've been attracted to Bhagavan's teachings. I love Bhagavan's teachings. To the extent that I am able, I try to put his teachings into practice, but I still have Vishaya vasanas. I still have, my mind still has an inclination to go outwards. So I haven't yet surrendered myself completely.
There's one point I want to make before you go on.
Yeah.
It makes me think perhaps otherwise, and that is your sweeping knowledge of everything that has to do with self-inquiry. I've seen many videos. You join our San Diego Ramana Maharshi study circle monthly now. You've never been stumped. You've never hesitated a nanosecond to come up with always what felt like the heartfelt correct answer. I used to think that this would be a download that would come to people once they made the transition into either self-enlightenment, self-awareness, whatever it might be. Do you have this sweeping universe of knowledge at hand as you do because of studying it? It sounds like maybe it was given to you, and it's not a download. I now come to see it as the blinders are lifted off the foggy inner vision that people have when they do become self-awakened.
Right. Certainly this is a gift. I mean, it's a gift from Bhagavan. That's all I can say. I can give one or two explanations.
Good.
One explanation is Bhagavan's teachings are actually extremely simple, extremely simple. Why people have difficulty understanding is because the human mind, generally the mind is complicated, and we cling on to so many preconceived ideas. If we want to understand Bhagavan's teachings, we need to be ready to jettison all our ideas and beliefs and come to a very, very, very simple understanding. If we understand that the basic principles of Bhagavan's teachings are extremely simple, if we understand and accept them, it's easy to answer any question in the light of his teachings.
For you.
That's why I say when I sometimes I wonder, how am I able to explain these things? So, I mean, it seems to me to be so easy. The answers seem to be all given by Bhagavan, whereas other people are struggling. I don't know. I think the 8 years I spent with Sadhu Om definitely had a profound impact on me. And the fact that I had that opportunity to question him so deeply, and in a way, the more I questioned, I learned to question deeply from him in a sense, because the more I questioned, the more I found I was getting. So I would ask more, I would go deeper and deeper and deeper and get more and more. So in a way, he taught me how to question deeply, not directly, but indirectly he taught me. That is one thing. Another thing, this is a personal belief I have. Bhagavan, as everyone knows, Bhagavan worshipped Arunachala, the hill, as God. And one thing that Bhagavan himself did was he walked around the hill many times, and he recommended to people that it is beneficial to walk around the hill. So while I was there, for most of the 20 years I was there, until towards the end when I was too sick to, and I wasn't able to go every day, but for most of my time there, I was going around the hill every day, walking around the hill every day. That may seem to be a very mundane thing. You simply, it's about 8 miles around the hill, you walk barefoot, and at certain points you, well, because I learned from Sadhu Om, I prostrated to the hill at certain points, and I went around the hill. Somehow I just loved going around the hill. And so I went as much as I could. Bhagavan once said, when someone was questioning him, what's the efficacy of this? Bhagavan said, whether you believe it or not, if you touch fire, it will burn. Likewise, whether you believe it or not, this hill is the fire of jnana. If you go round it, it will do good to you. Mm-hmm. I believe the clarity I have got is maybe at least in part attributable to the fact that I did Giri Pradakshina so many times. This will seem totally illogical, totally absurd, some sort of wacky religious beliefs to many people, but that is my humble belief. But of course, I can't prove that. But how I'm able to explain these things, I do not know, because I am definitely not enlightened in the sense of my ego has not been, I have not yet surrendered myself completely. Regarding the other people you say, most people think that they're enlightened. Most people have no idea what enlightenment is.
Talk more about that.
People get some type, it's true, if we're following the spiritual path, we do get some sort of clarity of understanding, and we may even get some experiences along the way. None of that is enlightenment. Enlightenment is the real enlightenment, jnana, as what Bhagavan talked about as jnana, that is the complete eradication of ego. When ego is eradicated, as Bhagavan says, if ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So the state of egolessness is the state of pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness in which we are not aware of anything other than ourselves, and not aware of any phenomena, any world, anything, just pure awareness. That is the state that is described as Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means being, or what is, what actually exists. Chit means awareness in the sense of pure awareness, that is awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. Ananda means happiness, infinite happiness.
But let me ask you a real quick question, because that's been on my mind for a long time from a reporter's viewpoint, because I've been long aware of Satchitananda, That last word for me is often seen as bliss, being, awareness, and bliss. Yet in the study circles, in the talks I listen to, in the interviews, there seems to be scant discussion about that third component. You call it happiness, I'll call it bliss. Why is that? I mean, equally aware of the importance of being and awareness, I would think the same focus would also go, the same concentration of focus on happiness.
Well, yes, that's why Bhagavan, as I say, Bhagavan wrote the first paragraph of Who Am I, all about happiness.
About happiness, yes.
As Bhagavan said, the one thing that we're all seeking, and we all means from the smallest ant to the highest God in heaven or whatever, all are seeking happiness.
And we're not talking about it.
All want is happiness.
And we're not talking about it in any dualistic terms, like the opposite of happiness is sadness. This is who you are, as I understand it. You are bliss, you are happiness.
Infinite happiness, a term that I often use as a synonym for happiness, because people often question that what is it really happiness, or is it just an absence of unhappiness?
Or does it come and go? Does it come and go?
But I often explain it in terms of infinite satisfaction. That is, our real nature is fullness, it's wholeness. So there's nothing lacking. If we remain as Satchidananda, that is the state of absolute fullness. Nothing, though there are no phenomena there, none of these things, it is the state of just pure being, pure awareness, and pure happiness. In that state, we are perfectly satisfied. There are two terms that are often used in Sanskrit, sukha and dukkha. Sukha is often translated as happiness, dukkha as unhappiness or sorrow or suffering. I think in many contexts, it's best to translate them as satisfaction and dissatisfaction. Like Buddha said, the whole, that is human life is, that is dukkha is one of the fundamental characteristics of human life. And people say, no, my life, I'm perfectly happy. I'm not suffering. I've got a very happy life. I've got all the things I need. So how can Buddha say it's all suffering? If we take it as dissatisfaction, we can understand it more clearly. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we are dissatisfied, because our real nature is infinite satisfaction. When we rise as ego, we limit ourselves as a small person, a small finite person, a person who lives for some 60, 70, 80, 90 years in this world. So limited in time, limited in place. We are limited in so many ways, so long as we rise as ego. So since ego is finite, it cannot experience infinite happiness. But something that is finite cannot experience what is infinite. So as ego, we are always dissatisfied. You can see this. If you look about the world, everyone has desires. People want money, or they want social status, or they want loving relationships, or they want something. But whatever we desire, when we get that thing, we're not satisfied. We want something more. We want something more. See, if you just think about money, there are people in this world, there are so many people who don't have anything, who don't even have enough food, whereas there are other people who have not only got billions, there are people with hundreds of billions. But are they satisfied? No, they still want more. So that is, dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego. If we try and sit quietly and just sit calmly, why thoughts keep on going through my mind? People say, I sat in meditation, I tried to stop the thoughts, but so many thoughts were coming. Why are those thoughts coming? Those thoughts are not just coming to us, it's we who are thinking. Why are we thinking? Because we are constantly seeking something outside ourselves, because we are dissatisfied. As an ego, we feel ourselves to be something very small. So we're dissatisfied. So we want something more. We want something more. We seek happiness in external things, in tasty food, in loving relationships, in so many things. We are constantly seeking happiness outside ourselves. this is where Bhagavan says, this is where we go wrong, because the happiness we are seeking doesn't lie in anything outside. So supposing you've been very poor all your life and you've always wanted to have a lot of money. One day, after working very hard, you wake up and you see in your bank account you've got $1,000. You're very happy. Oh, this is the first time in my life I've got $1,000. But very soon you're not satisfied with that $1,000. If I had $10,000, that would be even nicer, because this $1,000 can very quickly go. So you get your $10,000, you're happy for a moment, but then you want more, then you want more. Yeah. So whatever we get, we are dissatisfied with it, because the only thing that can satisfy us is infinite happiness. And anything less than infinite happiness is unsatisfactory. It may satisfy us a little momentarily, but it won't satisfy us for long. We want more, we want more, we want more. This is the nature of the mind, nature of the ego. It's always seeking more, seeking more, seeking more. But the problem is, what we are seeking is already ours. Ultimately, whatever your interest is, your interest may be in football, or it may be in politics, or it may be in anything. But people say, oh, no, I'm not interested only in happiness. I'm interested in justice in the world, or I'm interested in, I love to watch football. Ultimately, whatever we're seeking, we seek that thing because we derive happiness from it. If we see justice in the world, we'll be very happy. So long as there's injustice in the world, we're not happy about it. So it's ultimately, whatever we may be seeking, we're seeking it because it's going to make us happy.
A practical question.
It's going to make us happy, but nothing is going to satisfy us.
A practical question about that self-inquiry, because it's important, I think, to weave both this great significance along with the approach to it. Self-inquiry is a very important practice for people, I'm assuming, to do every day. I mean, for example, for years and decades, without knowing where to look, I've asked myself, who am I? Ramana is suggesting to ask yourself also when thoughts interrupt, as you've talked about them so thoroughly a minute ago. Who's having those thoughts? Where are those thoughts coming from? Are they coming from the self you only aspire to be, yet you really are, you just don't know about it yet? Some even call that a skill. I think Jody, my wife, was telling me that it's written up in one of the books that it's a skill that you're adopting. Can you give more of an explanation as to A, how important it is to maintain a practice, and B, how that works? Is it like altering your perception? Is it mind training or retraining, or is it something I'm missing?
Well, the practice is all important, because all this philosophy is, okay, to the extent that we understand Bhagavan's teachings, to that extent, just by understanding his teachings, it creates a certain frame of mind. You can say at least partially surrender. It's easier to accept the ups and downs of life. It's easier to maintain equanimity when we understand Bhagavan's teachings. Whereas Bhagavan's teachings explain everything and put everything in perspective. But merely understanding the teaching is not the point. The whole purpose of Bhagavan's teachings is for us to annihilate ego. And ego can be annihilated, because what is ego? Ego is nothing but a false awareness of ourselves. It's an awareness of ourselves as I am this. I am something other than what I actually am. I'm this body. So in order to annihilate the ego, we must be aware of ourselves as we actually are. In order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. So this practice is all important. And Bhagavan explained, that is, described the practice in two ways. Though he pointed out ultimately they're one and the same. Sometimes he explains it in terms of self-investigation, sometimes in terms of self-surrender. But ultimately they're one and the same, because we cannot investigate ourselves without thereby surrendering ourselves. And we cannot surrender ourselves completely without investigating ourselves. So ultimately they're inseparable. So That is the self we've got to surrender is this ego. So when we turn our attention within, we are thereby surrendering this ego. So the practice is all important. What is the practice? The practice is not just asking questions. It's not just asking who am I or to whom are these thoughts. The practice means turning our attention within to face ourselves alone. These questions, who am I or to whom are these thoughts, or who is aware of all these questions can help us to turn our attention back within. But merely asking the questions is not the investigation. That is, often it's this, the term Bhagavan used in Sanskrit is Atma Vichara, and the Tamil equivalent is Tannatam. These terms both mean self-investigation. Generally, they've been translated as self-inquiry. But the problem with the term inquiry often means asking questions. Inquiry can also mean investigation, but in this context, it means inquiry in the sense of investigation, not inquiry in the sense of asking questions.
You're looking to find out who you really are.
Yeah. We have to investigate who am I. That doesn't mean we ask the question, who am I? If I give you a book and if I tell you, investigate what's written in it, you don't sit there and ask, what is written in this book? What is written in this book? And if I ask you, why are you saying that? You told me to what is written in the book. So I'm asking what is written. You're not going to find out. If you want to find out what's written in the book, what do? You open the book and read it.
This book though gives you, go ahead.
To find out who or what we actually are, we need to turn our attention within. We need to look at ourselves. Metaphorically speaking, we need to be self-attentive.
And what you find, going back to the word I use to describe it, is truly revolutionary. You find out who you're not, and then you also find out who you are.
Well, finding out who we are not, we can, by rational analysis, we can understand, but we are not this body or mind. But in order to, that it's fine, we can say, yes, I understand I'm not this body, but my experience is I am this body. If someone comes at me with a knife, I'll be frightened because this body, my actual experience is this body is myself. That is my actual experience. It may be a false experience, but it is nevertheless my experience. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to turn our attention within. That which is aware of anything other than itself is only ourself as ego. In waking and dream, we rise as ego, experience ourselves as a body, and consequently we experience other things. In dream, we don't rise as ego, therefore we are not aware of any body or world or anything other than ourselves. So our real nature is pure awareness. That is awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, as pure awareness, we need to cease being aware of anything other than ourselves. So giving up awareness of other things is an essential prerequisite. However, though it is necessary to give up being aware of other things, it is not sufficient, because every night when we fall asleep, we give up being aware of other things, but ego isn't thereby annihilated. So we need to give up being aware of other things by attending only to ourselves. That is, the more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more other things will withdraw into the background, into the periphery of our awareness. And eventually, when our mind is purified sufficiently, we will be able to attend to ourselves so keenly, but we are aware of nothing other than ourselves. It's at that point that ego is annihilated. And once ego is annihilated, we will never again be aware of anything other. In fact, Bhagavan said even a further truth. When we know the truth as it is, we will know that there never was any ego at all. There never was any ego or world or anything. The ultimate truth is what is called ajata. Ajata literally means not born. That means nothing has come into existence. Nothing has appeared. What actually exists is always as it is, without ever undergoing any change whatsoever.
And this, I'm going to ask a somewhat challenging question, because it strikes me that we have to be gentle with ourselves if we're going to embark upon this seriously.
Yes,
And I
definitely.
say that because it's so easy for me to hear in anybody's speech about this spiritual path a non-dualistic tone as well as a dualistic tone. It sounds like Ramana referred to the mountain as God, meaning that
Yeah.
God's out there, that God is not in here. You talked about the value of going around the mountain. I mean, it's like me
Yeah.
being raised, and you too, a Catholic, with the value of dipping your finger in the font for holy water and do
Yeah.
the sign of the cross or the ashes on Ash Wednesday. But I try to see things as much as I can non-dualistically, and of course I fail, because I'm looking out the window to a beautiful day in Southern
So
California.
long as you see anything other than yourself, you are not seeing non-dualistically. You're seeing duality. There's
Yes.
what is the fundamental duality? It is subject and object. So
That's
long
it.
as we see anything other than ourselves, you've got duality there. That duality is not real. What is real is only the non-duality, but the appearance of duality is there, so long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves. That is why, in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, in order to experience Advaita, we need to be aware of ourselves alone.
Well, I had this question that I posed to our group that you speak at every month just the other day. I had a FaceTime a video, like a Zoom conversation with my granddaughters, and they're two, one's 3, one's 2, and it makes me deliriously happy. I never knew I could have that at my
Yeah.
age, and it does make me deliriously happy.
Yes.
It's difficult for me to see that one of my challenges is to surrender that sense of well-being to find the even greater sense of well-being.
Yes.
So you understand why people might offer some resistance at times, even though I'm not going to allow that to stand in my way.
Why talk about people offering resistance? We are offering resistance. That is, we as this ego are constantly resisting turning within, because turning within is putting our head on the chopping block.
Yes, it is.
So we are not yet ready to die, which is where we come to what you were just asking about. We need to be gentle with ourselves, because the fact is, through countless lives, which are, according to all these many lives are just many dreams, through these countless dreams, we've cultivated very strong, what he calls Vishaya vasanas. Vasanas means inclinations or propensities. Vishaya means phenomena. So Vishaya vasanas means the inclination to be aware of things other than ourselves is very, very strong. So we have to slowly wean our mind off its taste in being aware of other things. So this is, we are on a journey. But when you're on a journey, you can only proceed from a point where you are now. We have no idea how far we are from the goal. We may reach the goal the next minute. It may be after 100 lifetimes. It doesn't matter. The thing is, we know the direction in which we have to go now. The direction is we have to go within. Slowly, we need to cultivate this taste in turning the mind within and in just being as we actually are. So nowadays, enlightenment is very cheap. You read a few books, and you think you've understood something. You may even do a little bit of meditation, get an experience or two, and you're enlightened. Yes, I'm enlightened. But that is not enlightenment.
No, I think
Enlightenment is the complete eradication of ego. So when I hear people saying so-and-so is a jnani or so-and-so claims to be a jnani, I take all this with a big pinch of salt.
Mm-hmm.
I think the majority of the so-called enlightened people haven't got a clue what enlightenment is.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
With all due respect to them.
I hear exactly what you're saying.
I mean, I think many of these people may be very sincere. They may really believe they've got something. They may have attained a certain degree of equanimity by understanding these things.
And that's why
it's something completely different to the eradication of ego. Bhagavan was always emphatic. What we are seeking, our sole goal, is eradication of ego. When ego is eradicated, everything is finished.
You know, I could go on forever all day. I wish I could, and one day maybe I will. But I have two questions left, and one's kind of a downer, and the other one's kind of a one that brings a smile to your face. The first one, and I think you already partially answered this. For those of us who go through this life, and we're aware of Ramana and his teachings, furthermore, we employ his teachings, we practice them, and we still get to our last breath without getting across the finish line to self-awakening, my term. What happens when the body dies to a person like that? Is it just the dream that goes poof?
Well, one thing, when we, the last moment of the body's life is a favorable moment for the final surrender. It's not necessarily going to happen, but if we've been following this path, sincerely, it is quite possible that at the last moment, though we haven't yet reached the finish line, but we may finally be willing to let go and to surrender ourselves completely at that final moment. By surrender ourselves, that means by turning our attention fully within. If we don't, if the ego is not annihilated at that point, we will either begin dreaming or we'll be in sleep for a while and then begin dreaming again. That is, every life is just a dream, an extended dream. It doesn't matter how many lives it go on for, in a sense, in that when we leave this, if we leave this body and take another body, if we dream another dream like this, all that we have, that is all the viveka, that means the clarity of discrimination, the bhakti, the love to be as we actually are, and the vairagya, the freedom of desire from desire that we gain in this life, we carry forward in future. We don't, just because we leave the body, we don't, it's not a step backwards in our spiritual progress. The spiritual progress continues. So we will be born in some favorable circumstances, we'll again come to know Bhagavan's teachings, and we'll again continue following this path. So okay, it's if we think about it, oh God, going through all that business of being a child again and having to go to school and growing up again, it's a bother. But really, for Bhagavan, all these things are very, very trivial, because every life for Bhagavan, he says it's all just a dream. So, and once someone asked Bhagavan, though we hear your teachings and though we understand that happiness doesn't lie in things outside, it lies only within, yet our mind continues going outwards. Why is that? Bhagavan said, because you haven't yet had enough of it. So
you haven't, okay.
If we were really ready to surrender, we could surrender here and now, and that would be the end of the story. The fact that we haven't surrendered yet means we still have our desires and attachments. Mm-hmm. So we have to continue walking the path until finally we reach a point where we are finally ready to surrender completely. That is what is called complete surrender is nothing but the eradication of ego. It's one and the same thing.
Great,
and we
great.
can surrender only by letting go of everything, which means we have to cease being aware of everything else and remain aware only of what is ever existing, what alone is real, that is I am. Yeah. So it's only by clinging to I am that we can thereby surrender ego and everything else.
Thank you for that very satisfying answer. My final question, and it comes from your book, which I really admired when I first saw it, and my good fortune was to come into a copy of it, Happiness and the Art of Being, which you wrote, which Jody just bought for me for my 75th birthday this week. First of many editions, I think first published in 2006, was it?
Yes, yes.
In it you say, if we accept and truly understand the truth of non-duality, we will have no cause to quarrel or fight with any other being, with any other person. Does this mean that as a realized person, you would find nothing to quarrel about and no one to quarrel with? Or does it mean something other than that,
Well,
that humorous interpretation?
there is no such thing as a realized person, an awakened person, because so long as we experience ourselves as a person, we are not realized or awakened. When we are realized or awakened, ego is annihilated, therefore we are no longer a person. We no longer experience ourselves as a person. That's
So
one
nobody
thing.
walking this plane today is a
But-
fully self-realized individual.
Yeah. But in the case of like Bhagavan never if people came to argue with Bhagavan philosophy, I mean, if they wanted to put their own ideas there, Bhagavan would generally just keep quiet. He had no interest in arguing, because why should we argue with others? Everyone has their own beliefs, and their beliefs are probably what is suitable for them at their present level of spiritual development. We shouldn't say anything unless people ask us. We shouldn't, of our own accord. We're not to get up on a soapbox and start lecturing the world. Okay, it may seem absurd that now we're recording this and we're going to put it on YouTube, but not everyone is going to watch our YouTube videos. Most people will look at this and think, what nonsense is that? So only those who are interested in this subject will be interested in watching these videos and be interested in reading books about Bhagavan's teachings. Yeah. So we're not here to, there are different, like, as I said, even among Advaitins, there are many different levels of explanation, but we're not to go and argue with other Advaitins saying, no, your interpretation is wrong because Bhagavan has said this. What they believe is suitable for them at their present stage of development. When they progress further, they will then be ready to accept what Bhagavan has taught. So we don't, why should we quarrel with anyone? Let anyone believe whatever they want. So long as they're not doing harm to anyone, we don't have to worry about who believes what.
Yeah, and it does take seasoning, wisdom, and age to come to that realization. It's taken me forever. Michael James, I want to thank you, Michael James, for the fastest hour and a half I've ever had. And I only hesitate and stop here because I'm not quite sure what the capacity of Zoom is. Plus, it might give me another chance if you're willing one day, several months from now, to do this again.
Yeah, sure.
I hope
I love talking about this subject, so I'm happy to talk about this. So long as there are people who want to listen to me, people who are crazy enough to listen to me, I'm happy to go on talking. But I warn you one thing. Whatever you ask me, I'll be saying the same thing again and again and again. I have only one answer to all questions ultimately, because Bhagavan's teachings are so simple.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to know that, because as I alluded to earlier, I'm the sort of person, a little dense often, who needs to go deeper and deeper and deeper with the same thought, with the same point, with the same answer. Yeah. And you afford me that chance.
From a spiritual point of view, we're all dense. If we weren't dense, we would have surrendered ourselves. How foolish is it not to surrender ourselves? So if we surrender ourselves, what are we left with? We are left with the infinite whole. Yeah. But we're clinging to our little existence as a person so firmly, and we're not ready to let go of it. Bhagavan sometimes used to say, if we are unwilling to surrender, it's like a person who is offered all the wealth in the world in exchange for a quarter paisa or something, the tiniest coin. That may be all the wealth you have, that tiny coin, but you're asked to surrender that, and in return you'll get the infinite whole. So being unwilling to let go of this little ego, in exchange for that infinite Satchidananda, how dense are we?
Yeah.
We are very, very dense. And even after 44 years of reading and trying to practice Bhagavan's teachings, I'm still so dense, I'm still not willing to surrender.
I don't think so. You're setting the bar too high for those of us who want to be like you one day. And a final reminder to anybody who's with us this long into the program, I wish I had a way of knowing. Michael's many answers to every conceivable question that can be asked, I think, is available on YouTube under many listings. I really appreciate and admire your work and your dedication. And thank you again, Michael James, for allowing us to come in.
All thanks to due only to Bhagavan, because I'm nothing, or whatever I say is what I've learned from Bhagavan. So I'm just like a tap. If you open the tap, the water comes out. But the tap is the water doesn't come from the tap. The water comes from another source.
And
So
with your grace,
I'm just the tap.
and with your permission and with your grace, we can do it again, I hope.
Oh yes, certainly.
Thank
Bhagavan
you.
willing.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Now.